Hello, I've got a special treat for you today. We're going to be talking about spirit photography. I get a lot of questions from clients about this very subject, and today we'll be covering it in great detail with my expert for today. And for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. This is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It also goes out on my YouTube channel and the Lilydale Facebook page. I do encourage you to like and share and subscribe and all of those good things so we keep the show going. This is actually year 9 of Wednesdays with Willis. You got lots of archived videos of past shows, and I have special guests on the show frequently to talk about subjects relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. And I am so happy to welcome back onto the show today, Shannon Taggart. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be back.
Yes, Shannon is one of my favorite people because she has been in the world of spirit photography. She's a wonderful spirit photographer. She's the author of the book Seance, and she's taken so many photos all over the world, physical mediumship phenomenon. And she's also the coordinator of the summer symposium here in Lilydale, the science of things spiritual. So she gets to talk with all people from all over the world, bring them together, scholars and artists and authors and spiritualists all in one place here in Lilydale in the summer. And I know we had a great summer for that this year, and you're going to be gearing up for 2026. And we'll, of course, have you back on the show to talk about that guest lineup. But today, we're really going into a subject that's near and dear to your heart, spirit photography. So,
Yes.
yes. So
Yes.
let's dive into that. What is spirit photography?
Well, early on in spiritualism, uh, I guess, maybe I should show an example right away of, I'll show one of the most famous spirit photographs, is this spirit photograph of Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln, taken by the first known spirit photographer, William Mumler. And so it's pictures that are supposed to show the spirit world and our world connecting. Now, it has a controversial past because when photography first came about, people didn't understand much about the photographic process, and we know that this, you can do things like double exposure, and actually William Mumler was accused of fraud and was placed on trial in New York State, and he was acquitted for lack of evidence. So, I could stop sharing this for right now, and just to get back to the to because I want to first ask you, as a spiritualist and as a medium, I find that there's a lot of different perspectives people today have on spirit photography, and I'm wondering what you personally think about it, Willa.
So, my understanding of spirit photography is it's had a very interesting history. It's been around as long as photography has existed,
Hmm.
but also, I do feel people have perceived it in other ways. But as a spiritualist and having clients come to me, and sometimes they'll show me a photo, sometimes I think it could be real, and sometimes I'm thinking, no, this is glare, this is lens flare, this is other things. And I do think it's important to be a healthy skeptic about these things. I think that when we're looking at spirit photography, we can't just assume that it is real. We want to have trust and faith about a lot of things. But as you're going to get into in just a little bit, it's definitely had its own problems through history.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there have been people who were like spirit photographers who were busted doing fraud and then admitted fraud. But still, even in those cases, some of the people who received the pictures said that no, they really were authentic. So you always have, I mean, this whole thing, it's deeply enmeshed in the Fox sisters story, for example, that they were speaking to spirits and then they said they were cheating and then they recanted. And all of this blurring of what is actually happening
And the
is
pressures of
it's
that. Yeah. But in terms of spirit photography, I think today we're going to be really focusing on what examples of spirit photography for our viewers today, and then some of the branches of that spirit photography. So usually it's a capture of the, we'll say, so-called essence of spirit, correct?
yeah, I mean the early ones were like the ones I'll reshare again. My the you know this is the um this is one of the most famous spirit photographs ever,
Right.
which, historian Ron Nagy, Lilydale historian, always says, Abraham Lincoln is the only US president who is not on paper declaring exactly what his religion is. And many, we know that the Lincolns hosted seances in the White House and that his wife was a spiritualist and that she had received messages from their deceased son.
Mhm.
Some of the it later in the post World War One era, spirit photography comes back again in these type of forms, which look different than the Mummler ones, and they obviously look like pasted in and but people still were claiming to be having experiences with these images. And one thing that it's clear, regardless of what how the pictures are made, which is that these pictures also they tell the story of spiritualism. They're important, kind of they're part of the visual history of spiritualism. They're explaining that people were claiming contact with the dead and saying they were having these experiences and feeling these experiences were authentic. And so this is a really famous one. This is in my book because I did a book called Seance, which is so, unfortunately no longer in print, but I know Willa has some, and we have copies in the museum at Lilydale. And but so this is in because some of my book goes into this history, because what happened was when I started photographing in Lilydale in 2001, that's where I learned about spirit photography. I did not learn about it in school. This history is written out of the photo history books. They
Mm.
don't talk about it. And that's because, photography, it was trying to be the official academia, media were trying to, and the art world are trying to kind of claim that photography is an art. And so it was more focused on what photography could do in sort of a normal sense. And this kind of was seen as an embarrassing history, an absurd history. It's not. So I didn't even know that it existed until I went to Lilydale and I learned about it in the museum. And
So
so,
with
yeah.
this visual history, and some of these are more fraud based, right? But do you feel that there are some examples you could show us that you feel are authentic?
Um, well, I don't know. Well, I'll start with that. The ones that I am most fascinated by in that sense, it would be the orb photography of
Okay.
today,
Mhm.
because this vintage stuff. I would claim that people say, oh, spirit photography, that it's a thing of the past, but I think that the spirit photography of today is the orb photography. And what is really interesting about that is that when people they'll get orbs in their pictures, but it goes beyond that, because then they'll put out their hands and say, "Will you sit? I want an orb right in my hand," and they'll take pictures until they get it. And so it's not necessarily about what is causing the orb, because a lot of people say it's water, it's dust, it's artifacts that are out of focus and creating this orb.
Mhm.
But the orb photographers are saying we they claim that they can get them in situations like clean rooms, but they're saying, besides that point, besides the technical explanations that you're giving, we are interacting and having a communication with these orbs. And sometimes they zoom in and see faces and patterns and get messages. So it's almost like the orb photography thing today, it's really become more like almost like using photography the way that Ouija was early used in spiritualism for messages. It's like
So
using, because they're
let's
claiming to get interactive messages by showing patterns, by appearing, by responding to requests, by having an interaction that is being shown in the pictures.
so for people who aren't familiar with what an orb is or looks like, would you have an
Okay.
example of that? And what how
Yes.
would you define an orb?
Um, so let me get to my orb. I'm gonna want to skip ahead to the orb. Oh, I'm gonna skip ahead to the orb stuff. Uh, you can't see my screen right now, right?
Nope,
Um,
not yet.
let me see if I can skip very share. Okay, we can see this orb, right? You can see this orb. Can you
Mhm.
see? Uh,
So define what an orb is, just on a very basic level for people who aren't used to that word in terms of
um,
photography.
so an orb is a circular image of light. It looks like it's made by light. I'm going to have to go all the way through to get to my orbs.
We can
Sorry,
always go in a
I put it
different
at
way
the
if you
end.
want to.
Okay. So this is an orb by one of my favorite orb photographers, her name is Liz Webb, and
Mhm.
she's on Instagram at Amazing Orbs. And so this is like an example of one of her orb photographs. Like, so a skeptic will say that's just a piece of dust. That's like she's getting in her picture. But when you interview Liz, which I have, she says, "No, I ask for the orb. When usually my dad appears as a blue orb, but when I say, Dad, will you show me an orb? It'll be blue. When my ask for my mom, it'll be orange." She gets these like really fascinating colors. She gets different shapes. She has an orb spirit guide that has particular markings. So she's basically identifying this phenomena, asking it to appear, having also, she's a medium too, so she's getting mediumistic information and then having it confirmed in her photos. So it's a process. And a lot of the orb, if you look at her images, they really have you can see how they develop. It's really strange.
So a couple
Um,
questions then, because is she visually and clairvoyantly or objectively or subjectively seeing the orbs when they're happening?
so sometimes she sees them,
Yes.
sometimes she only sees them in the pictures.
And they are always sphere-like in nature, but then they show up 2D, two-dimensionally in the photo.
Yeah, and sometimes in her images, if you go on her Instagram, she has all different types of orbs that she gets, and some look like they're deconstructing, and some come in pairs, some travel. So she has her own system, but again, like she's an orb photographer who's like in practice every day.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you'll see online people will post pictures like this where they ask for the orbs to sit in their hands and come in. There's a lot of books and material on the orbs, and you can find a lot of it online. And in my research, I was told that it started in the early days of the internet. A lot of grieving mothers were getting orbs in their photographs and started to post them online and then have discussions about it.
Mhm.
And one of the techniques, like this is an example of orb calling, where you sit and you set the intention of having orbs, and then you take pictures, and then you get orbs. And a lot of times you'll see people online posting these series of, like, they'll ask for the room to fill up with orbs, or they'll do things like that. This is just an example of some of the ones I've found online where people ask for a specific, like, sit on my fingertip, or like, I want the whole thing, or like, go near the suitcase. So, this woman was asking her late husband, if you're here, can you show me an orb by the suitcase? And then she gets one. So it's an interact they're interacting with the spirit world and asking for confirmation of information, or to show them things in with the orbs. So that's how, so I feel like it sort of it takes the idea of spirit photography into this messaging or this communication system.
Mhm.
So it kind of expands, and we can do this now because of digital. You don't need a big view camera with you can only get one exposure and then you have to take it in a wet, dark room and wait for it to dry. Part of the reason this has developed in such a way is because we have this digital photography
Immediacy, the entertainment.
immediacy, this advancement.
Mhm.
Um, and so here's one. So Teresa Schaefer for years has done orb photography in Lilydale, and her and I will be like, I'll be with her when she's going to guide us at the stump to do orb photography on the 24th on October. And this is one where, she put out her hand and then I got an orb coming in on the other side. And then this is one from my book that is in the book Seance, where this woman, she went and she was asking for orbs from her daughter. And I did get some orbs, and I don't usually get orbs in my pictures. And she said that after she lost her daughters, she has gotten some really incredible orb evidence in her and her living daughter from the daughter who is deceased. And so this is another one. This is just an example of like Liz Webb's orb photographs. So she gets a lot of. So when I say to Liz, well, what do you say to people who say it's all just, it's just dust, it's just watermarks? And she said the color is there. Like they talk to me in color, they talk to me in shape, they talk to me in the in many different ways that get beyond the fact that people just say it's dust or water. So I try to just present both sides, because as a photographer, I understand the technical side, and a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just, it's dust, it's lens, it's just close to the camera," and I understand that, but I also understand that Liz is having experiences that she can't explain, and she's getting these beautiful pictures.
So, what would you say to someone who's wanting to do this at home? They're not a photographer per se, but they're wanting to do this. You think setting the intention is most important, or do you think that what will happen is they'll just sort of have a spontaneous moment where they've taken a picture and maybe they're standing alone or with their group of people, and there's a face and an orb or some other um, kind of almost apparition like figure next to them? What would you say is more likely?
I from what I've been able to observe, because I am a photographer and I've also been interested in spiritualism. I've been really fascinated by this intersection, which is the orb. And as far as I can tell, it's exactly the way that you teach somebody to develop mediumship. It's just with using a camera, where it's like, um, it can just happen spontaneously and then you start going after it, or you can set an intention and start working with it, or those things, because some mediums, they have been mediums since they were children, and it's just very natural process for them, and that's just it's very natural for them. Where others, the only I've met one, Lynn Chaluka, who is now deceased, but and we miss her in Lilydale, but she was my friend, and she told me she became a medium by setting the intention and doing the work and doing the development, and that it was it her she started with an interest in mediumship that then she developed into mediumship and was a medium, and she was a very fine medium. So I don't know. What do you does that sound like the way you develop?
Yeah, in many ways, that's how people develop. They certainly feel that call and they start to immerse themselves in classes and fine tune that development, which is so essential. But I would say most of the clients that come to me with spirit photographs, these are things that have spontaneously happened to them mostly. And they're wanting my opinion. Do you think this is the real deal? Do you think this is just wishful thinking on our part, that this is our son in the photo next to us? Or this is we went back to a place we've always been before with him, and he's passed now, and we went and stood practically in the same spot, and here he is in this photo, but he's deceased. Things like that. And I think they sometimes can sense their folks at home or just in those random moments. And then over the years, I would say in the last 10 years, it's kind of switched over a little bit more toward orbs. People saying I see a bunch of orbs. Now, those tend to be at nighttime scenes. You
Yes.
know, occasionally someone will show up with an orb that was a daytime, very rare. Usually it's
Mhm.
a nighttime scene. And I'm just wondering from the healthy skeptic standpoint, is there anything about the nighttime, the night vision? I know when I'm using the camera and things are different when you do night photography. Is there anything that contributes?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's just dust and you're in the dark and you're flashing, yeah, you are more apt to get, just or like orbs in the air.
Hmm.
But at the same time, there's one book, and I don't have it with me right now, but it's in my book where I was in Italy and I went to a conference and there was a bunch of orb photographers there. And they said, okay, we're going to go into the mountains and we're going to do an orb photography shoot. And I said, I'm going to bring my camera, but I'm not going to get any orbs because I never get orbs. And one explanation is that I have a big professional camera with a large sensor, and my flash is high above my camera, which you could argue that the small digital cameras with the tiny chips and the tiny flash right over the lens, you're more apt to get a dust particle that looks like an orb. So I said, I probably won't get any orbs because I never get orbs. And so we went up to the mountains and they said, no, when we say our prayers and then we go into the mountains, you will get orbs. And I took a picture after they said the prayers, and I got a picture where every single inch of the frame is covered in orbs. And I've never gotten anything like that before, and I've never gotten anything since. And it totally blew my mind. But at the same time, I cannot say, oh, it wasn't, so there wasn't some technical explanation. So the only thing I can say, and I can say this too, because I get a lot of two people, I get people all over the world who write to me and send me photos and say, what is this? Or, photography is a mysterious process. If I'm not there, even if I was there observing and seeing the whole scene and then looking at the picture, I still might not be able to tell you exactly what happened in that picture. So unfortunately, this stuff doesn't prove in a sense that you can, you could prove in a court that this had happened, but it it oftentimes deepens the mystery of these experiences or confirms for people that they had the experience. Like when you were saying about they went to the spot that meant something of their son, and then they got this weird picture. I mean, I think that's beautiful, and um, it's sort of like when you do mediumship and people want exactly they want dates and time and street names and all, like that's not how mediumship works
No.
either. So I'm just open to the mystery of it all, and I do think um I called it in my book, I started to look for synchronicity, and I felt like that was um when I got that, I felt like something was happening, but I would never like put it as like, oh, this is scientific evidence. Unfortunately,
Right.
I don't think it is scientific evidence.
So at this point, it can only be anecdotal at best. But at the same time, the things that it could be, if you were playing the skeptic, it could be dust, it could be
Mhm.
movement, right? If you move the camera right when you're clicking, especially when I'm in night mode, I never have the flash on for my camera during the
Mhm.
day or at night. And so I know that it does blur things, so I
Yes.
always take that into account. And you can also get glare from light. You never know what's
Yes.
coming your way on that. Are there other factors for people to just keep in mind to rule out?
Well, also too, every time we're taking pictures, you're changing the size of things. You're taking 3 dimensions and putting into 2 dimensions. Like
Yeah,
photography is a complete manipulation, even if you're not even talking about things like that on top of
yeah,
it.
that's true.
So, I am approaching the whole thing as an artist.
Mhm.
I was actually just recently talking to somebody, a psychical researcher, like a somebody who's doing parapsychology and using video and cameras, and I was saying, help me understand how you're using it scientifically because it's hard to use those things scientifically. I mean,
Yeah.
so you can it can be testimony towards something, it can be personal, it can be artistic, but it's like anything with mediumship and the spirit world. There's still a lot of mystery to it all, and
Right. So those were
so
the ones I listed, though, are the main things that people would need to rule out.
yeah.
Okay.
But then there's orb photographers. There's people who say, well, you need to give spirit something to work with. So, there's a lot of I find it all fascinating, and I find actually a lot of the orb photography can be really beautiful and um very intriguing
Hmm.
as
It is.
evidence.
Yeah. So I know we wanted to touch on the difference between spirit photography and psychic photography.
Yes. So, maybe I have to ask you this because I get this question a lot, and I'm sure I think it's an important question. But can you help explain, people say mediums and people say psychics and people say psychic mediums. What is the difference between mediumship and like being a psychic? Like being a medium and being a psychic, or like are the I know I've heard it said every or all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. So can you help us
If we want to be
unpack this?
purists, I guess if we want to be purists, right? A psychic is a person who reads the energy around a person, a place, or an object,
Okay.
right? And is receiving impressions. A lot of psychics like to do the, hey, I see this around you, and these are the things that are currently around you, and this is stuff for the future. So they may focus heavily on future telling or steering a person in that kind of direction. A medium does not. The medium is the point of mediumship is an experimental sitting with a medium who has the intention to connect with spirit communicators, verifiable spirit entities that are your family and immediate close friends, sometimes pets that have passed. And so, for that to happen, they're working on bringing through that survival of the personality after so-called death. So they may bring in personality, character traits, um, the appearance of that individual. I really like to focus a lot on the relationship and how they felt together when they were here on the earth plane. And I usually ask them to come forward the way they were when they were here because that is more verifiable and authentic. And they can always show me what I call version 2.0 later. But again, the focus is on being, I guess, psychic with the spirit communicator so that I can receive by seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, tasting, knowing through that communication with the spirit loved one who's passed, that they're here and now. And so that's what happens during the course of a private reading or in a brief way through a spirit message. So in a purist form, that's what those would be. Now, sometimes people label themselves as psychic mediums. They tend to be doing more heavily the psychic work with maybe a sprinkling of mediumship in there. Usually it's very detailed on their websites if they're leaning one way or the other, or people can kind of pick and choose. But if people are wanting that pure experience, then they're probably going to want to be with someone who designates that they are a medium, a spiritual medium, an evidential medium, that sort of thing. There's a different sensibility when you're a spiritualist medium because there's always the connection with the sacred and knowing that it's a sacred joy to connect with someone's loved ones in spirit. So that's how I would make that defining line between psychic and medium and the expectations that people can have about those things.
Yes, and not to get too off topic, but this does relate to technology because spiritualism has always since the early days. I mean, even the Fox sisters, that was called the spiritual telegraph. So there is this connection between technology and spiritualism that has been
Hmm.
there. And early on, the Ouija board was invented by spiritualists, and the idea behind it was so that messages could come faster. And then it developed into something else in culture. And now, when you go to,
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, no, spiritualists do not use Ouija boards. And
Mhm.
a lot of times in culture, you hear these scary stories. So, is that because people aren't raising their vibration and
Right. They're not
working?
setting that sacred intention to do the work. They're in what I call spook and boo mode. So they're very different kinds of intentions. So with everything, but especially in the development of mediumship, we have to have right intention and right practice. And when those merge, and you're very consistent in that approach, then you have beautiful, sincere, authentic spirit communication. And so I would imagine that when it comes to psychic photography and spirit photography, there's a difference because we've just been talking about spirit photography being showing the faces, the essences of those that have passed. Hopefully, an individual's actual verifiable um, loved ones. But it sounds like sometimes in some of the examples you were showing us, it's not always about that. It doesn't have to be personally known folks to them. So how does that merge and shift towards psychic
So in
photography?
psychic photography, there's been a lot of experimentation to try to prove invisible things that are not spirits, right? So
Hmm.
try to photograph our thoughts, or try to
Hmm.
photograph a dream, or like a feeling of anger, or a feeling of love, or also the life force that animates us, as living beings, like trying to prove that it's um, an energy that you can see,
Hmm.
or also healing energy, stuff like this. And in psychic photography, so I can try to let me just reorganize my thing while I talk. But so there's been a lot of this type of experimentation throughout the history, and it the funny thing is that it goes away and comes back. People think, oh, it's not really proving anything, so we're not going to do it. And then there'll be another technique that comes along. And so I guess I want to say that there still is truly a mystery to it all. And I'm going to show my
So I'll just comment real briefly because you have that filter on for your Zoom. It shifts you in and out of focus, and occasionally it gives you extra like little blue wings. It's like that. So you've got like, if somebody were to think this was real, right? They would say, "Oh my gosh, Shannon, let's just take a picture. We got spirit photography going on, and we're
See?
seeing different flashes of your aura."
See, you're right. It's this play of perception.
Yes,
So
yes.
a diagram of a researcher in the late 1800s who would put photographic plates onto people's foreheads and try to photograph like their thoughts or their feelings just by placing it on the forehead. And this is one where he the plate was put on the forehead, and it the woman was thinking of an eagle, and they got this picture where it does look like an eagle. So there, and then in the 70s, there was a man named Ted Sirios. Have you ever heard of him? He said he
Yes.
could project his thoughts onto Polaroid film,
Yeah.
and these are some of his pictures. Um, and there's recently been a book. Some of my colleagues have done a book all about him, and in the book, it's a really fascinating case because they were never able to explain how he did all of those pictures. And even though there were investigators who said, oh, he did it this way or that way, he was put into so many situations and he was still able to produce them. So there's some real mystery that goes into it. And what I love about the book is that it doesn't try to prove or discount, it just presents the evidence and lets the reader digest it.
Hmm.
And so these are a lot of the names that, we call the spark of vitalism, the magnetic fluid of Mesmer, the chi of Chinese medicine, the prana of yoga. This idea of this uh, energy that animates the living is present in many cultures and was gone by many different terms throughout time. And so there were a lot of attempts to try to prove this was photography, and also to try to photograph like illness or use it for diagnosis, or like this is one where they were trying to use it for diagnosis. I don't know how you would do. I mean, people had a lot of different ideas about what you could do with photography. And then we have Curlian, which is something I'm going to be presenting also at FunFest, where you're using electricity in combination with the body to see if you can see the aura and discern any information out of that. I interviewed an expert on this, a man who was a historian of electricity and had been involved in the 70s when this became very popular again. And I asked him, "Is there something to Kirlian photography?" And he said, "Kirlian photography does not prove a mechanistic function, like situation. It's not a scientific evidence of this, but," he said, "certain people get different results. Like some people can so this is an example I found on the internet of showing like the different auras between mushrooms, and it's kind of silly, but is there something to it? I don't know. It The way it works is you put high voltage electricity through an object or a living thing, depending on the grounding situation, and then you photograph the corona that comes out from that. And they were doing this in the late 1800s, and it's different from this is called like an aura photograph. And
Mhm.
so this is a device made by Guy Coggins. Where have you ever had your aura photograph done,
At
Willa?
one point, yes. And the way I've always understood it is it's just a moment in time of what your aura looks like, the
Yeah,
colorations,
yeah.
the different connections that are happening in and around you in that cloud of color. And so it's just a moment in time. It's not representative of your aura all the time.
Right. And so what happens with this is that you put your hands in this device, and you get your picture taken, but the device is reading your some signals from your hands and your skin, and then creating a color and then putting it onto so it's actually a double exposure what is happening with these aura photographs. And a
Mhm.
lot of people call this Kirlian, so I put it in my thing to say no, this is not Kirlian.
Which makes me
Kirlian,
wonder if it's kind of like mood photography. Like a mood ring.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
is some of that based on the thermography of it all and just the readouts of energy that way and
right.
how it translates on an electromagnetic level, possibly through that. Does that
Well,
sound right at
often
all?
often you'll get people, they do the photograph and then they give a psychic reading in combination with the
Hmm.
image.
An interpretation.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So there's like a whole you know, there's a whole thing with it. But the man who invented it really believed that the biofeedback was saying something about the body, and that the colors. I mean, it's not just like something that was made as a hoax and a joke. He
Right.
really,
But I do feel it has a bit of that mood ring connection to it in the sense of
yeah, yeah.
what kind of energy someone's giving off at that particular moment. And I'm thinking back to when you just showed us the mushroom photos, the organic versus the commercial mushroom. Um, this wasn't like a leaf put onto a glass plate or anything, right? This was
I
something
don't
that,
know, because I don't know who did this one, so it's
right.
probably shouldn't isn't the best example, but this is a very common example where you'll see people are trying to signify a state of change by
Hmm.
doing this photographic process.
Hmm.
And so and because of the X-ray, early on in the, when the X-ray revealed that, wow, you can see the bones inside of a human being using a photographic process, what else can photography show us? So there was
Right.
real faith that there were other things that could be revealed through imaging.
Sure.
And so this is a weird example where This is from historical evidence where they took a mummified hand and and they mesmerized it, and then they tried to photograph it to see if they could photograph this mesmeric fluid, like having a mesmerist pass.
Are you saying that they passed electricity through the mummified hand?
Um,
What are you
yeah,
saying when you say
well,
mesmer? Because that's what I
oh
understand some
yeah, so I was
mesmeristic.
talking about the electricity, right? And then
Okay.
X-rays, and then this is another photographic process that is not electricity, where they're
Okay.
just trying to prove like a healing force or the mesmeric, like when you do healing, a mesmeric pass, that's what they would call it, that they're
So they're
trying to
saying that they did this. How did they produce this photo
they just put it basically they just put this hand on a plate
on a plate?
and try to discern the evidence of just the force just by
Ah, so
with
this is the
no
energy
electricity.
force left behind after they put the mummified
Yeah.
hand upon it.
Yes, but in photography we know that there is chemistry, and chemistry makes patterns, and that there's no you can't a lot of the experimenters were uh, it's like, no, this is just a chemical process. You're not actually photographing that. And so then when they wanted to try to take it the idea further, they were using electricity. And this idea of galvanism. People had like a lot of, when you can put electric shock through a frog and then it animates.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that's the whole Frankenstein thing. So there's a lot
exactly.
of so now you're getting into not only the mystery of photography, but the mystery of electricity itself.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of hope that what if we combined these two things, electricity and photography, and what can we see, and what it does, it is a fascinating intersection, and you would be curious about what would happen. Um but back in the day, this is a bad photo, but it's the best example I've I had. There was an experimenter who said, I don't think any of this is really about the life force. I think it's just a pattern made from water and or moisture or other things, other
Sure.
physical explanations. And so this guy, he got two sausages from rival butchers, and he said, I'm going to try to photograph their anger that these butchers have against each other by electrifying the sausages. So you see, and this was and after this, people were like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe this
Who's more
process.
angry? Which sausage is more angry? I don't know.
Right, right.
Anger
So
dim the light, or does anger grow the light?
yes, so it becomes a phenomena, just like a visual phenomena, that the meaning has to be discerned. It's not, again, with photography. What can photography technically prove? It's
So the Kirlian photography method is still the same today. Has it evolved
well,
in any
so
way?
it was forgotten after experiments like this. It was forgotten, and then in Russia, the Kirlians that are seen here, they rediscovered it, and it was have you ever seen a picture like this?
Oh, sure.
People
Yes.
started to really, this is called the phantom leaf effect. And so
Hmm.
it, it was written about in this very famous book that came out in the late 60s. Have you ever seen this book?
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And they talk about a lot of the experiments that were going on in Russia. And so it became it was reinvented again in the 20th century. And there's this woman who I find very fascinating named Thelma Moss, who she had a lab at UCLA, and she's famous for giving David Bowie a Kirlian device. And she was very interested in like what could the Kirlian process show about the body. So she would have him do it before and after he took cocaine, and he's trying to show that there is a difference between the Kirlian impression. And so this she tried to photograph phantom leaves, and this is an amputated rat tail that she was trying to show that the life force. I mean, um, a lot of these are trying to show healing energies, and she did a lot of work with this Olga Worrell. Have you ever heard of her? She was a well-known healer in the
Sounds
20th
familiar.
century.
Mhm.
So, and Thelma Moss felt like she really did discern major differences in the effects that Olga was getting, but nobody accepted it as evidence. This is a non-electrical photograph by Olga Worrell, which she described as ectoplasm. So this is a Kirlian photo that this is kind of ectoplasm photography coming back in the Kirlian era.
So if it was
Um,
non-electrical, how was that produced?
that's probably a pattern. It's probably she just put like just a hand on a photographic material to see what would happen. But
Say a
in
photographic
photography,
material, you don't mean it's not the glass plate. Is it like Kodak film or what are you
well, if
what do
this
you
was
mean
in
by
the
that?
70s, it would probably be emulsion, like a film emulsion
A
or
film emulsion.
something
And then it
like
had this
that.
very interesting patterning. Almost looks like it's
Yeah, but in
zoomed in.
photography, there's so they are saying this is a great example to how tricky all this stuff is because when they got this, they thought Olga Worrell had made like an ectoplasmic photograph. And in photography, there's a thing called reticulation, which happens if the film or the paper it goes gets too hot or too cold, it'll make the substance kind of make a pattern and look like this looks like reticulation.
Hmm.
But Moss said that that's not what happened, that's not how they got it. So there's all of this ambiguity to all of these. And here's one. This is where she had taken coffee, uh, a finger pad in a normal state, and the same woman after she had taken coffee and a cigarette for her first time. Now does this prove this or not? I mean, we will.
So does that dull the energy to have
Um,
those? What do they think they if they're interpreting this? How would they interpret it?
well, I think they would. I think a lot of it would be like, oh, look at the breaks in the aura. It's
Hmm.
it's a disrupted aura.
Hmm.
But people who are critical of it say, no, it's just a different, they're pressing the thumb at a different amount of pressure, and
Yeah.
maybe they're sweating a little bit, and that's causing this pattern. So I'm
Right.
trying to show how complicated it is when you're trying
Yeah.
to say these things with photography.
Hmm.
And also Uri Geller, who we know from spoon bending, which
Yeah. Yeah.
Willa and I will be collaborating on some spoon bending.
Yes. A live
Um,
class in Lilydale.
so these are some of Uri Geller's when he's trying to do some psychic uh, or telepathic patterning with his finger um, using the Curlian. And so these he was trying to send the number five and these. And even they tried to use Kirlian photography to prove acupuncture points of Chinese medicine. And there were some researchers who claimed that they were able to map the points, and then other people who took the data and said, no, we weren't able to see it. So it's a very, I guess what I'm trying to say is the whole overlap of spirit photography and psychic photography is a very ambiguous uh, field. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we were to talk about photography, but I think before we do, we should make sure we mention we've been referring to the fall festival that is coming here in Lilydale on Friday, October 24th, Saturday the 25th, and Sunday the 26th. There's a fall festival here in Lilydale. It's an off-season program and event that's in person that you could come and attend different classes. You could go ahead and get registered for those on the lilydaleassembly.org website. So if you go to the lilydaleassembly.org website and in the search bar, type in Fall Fest, the different events will come up. Make sure you click more so you can see another page that loads so that you can register for the different classes. Shannon Taggart, who's my guest today, is going to be teaching a few of those. You'll be doing the aura photography with Teresa Schaefer. You'll be doing Kirlian photography. You're doing. I know you're doing some other ones as well.
yes, so I'll share. I'm doing spirit photography with Javi
Okay.
Richards.
Hmm.
Um, but
And we can
so
see your whole computer screen, just so you
yeah,
know.
okay, so now you can see this.
Okay.
Um,
But I
so
want to make sure we mention all the different ones you're doing for the Fall Fest. So
yeah,
you're doing spirit photography, and then you're also doing spoon bending, and that will be with me. And then any others that you're here
I'm
for?
going to do a Curlian talk
Really?
and a demonstration, and then orb photography with Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Javi, we're doing spirit photography. Now, Javi does in Lilydale does her own technique, which I am totally fascinated by, and I'm there to learn from her
Mm-hmm.
because she's been doing this for a number of years. But I think it's close to or related to what I've experienced in other situations as scotography,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is when you take the seance room or the circle and you basically turn it into a dark room, and they hand out photo paper, and you take it and you ask for a message, you set an intention with the paper, and then it comes out with a pattern that then you interpret for yourself. And so this is one where I was in where we put all the paper on the floor and set the intention, and then the light goes off, and then you go and process it, and you come with a pattern. Now, I've been in situations where people, like for example, at this one, it's not the picture in in the picture, but it was a woman who was here. She got one that looked like a breast being x-rayed, and she had just been healed from breast cancer, and she felt like that was a confirmation of her healing. And I was recently I conducted a scotography workshop just to teach students how they could do it if they wanted to do it. And one girl said when she set her intention, she asked for a message from her mother. And when we were processing them, she went to go get hers, and she said, "Oh, mine are whatever number," she said. And the woman said, "Oh, yours is the one with the dot." And she was shocked because her mother's name was Dot, and she had asked for a message from her mother. So again, it's one of those things like, what is that? I don't know. She felt like it was a connection that she
So
got. So
photography, it sounds very similar to thought photography that you talked about earlier in the
yeah, yes,
program.
the process is the same, but the
Mhm.
intention is different. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to show like the different ways people approach or use it. And a lot of times it's not using a camera.
Mhm.
Like it's just trying to use the photographic material itself to
And what kind
see.
of photography paper would you suggest people if they're going to go out and buy some in the store today?
Um, well, you could just use regular black and white paper, but now we're in the digital age, so it's harder to find that stuff, but you can still
Mm.
buy it. And I
Hmm.
think Javi does it in a way. And I'm actually, I asked her because I talked to her about this, and she's got her own technique of doing it. She does not flash light. She just uses pure paper, and she said she always gets results. So I'm going to be a student of hers when I'm there and see how, and she's been doing it for quite a long time, and I know it's a passion of hers is spirit photography.
So just get plain black and white paper that you can purchase at what kind of store?
Well, you'd have to go to you'd have to probably order it online because
Hmm.
back in the like earlier, like for example when I first started photography, it would be common, there was Delaware Camera in Buffalo, and you would just go in and walk in
Right.
and buy photo paper, and it would be no big
Be
deal.
done.
But now we don't have that as much. So there's places like B&H Photo that's in New York, but they'll ship anywhere. It's harder to find these things.
So that's where they can get a resource for that. If people are really into the Kirlian photography and they want to find a resource to purchase the equipment for something like that, where would they go?
Well, there's I don't know the name of the place, but there is a place in Staten Island that builds devices.
Mhm.
But also, many people build the devices themselves. I'm not as tech as that, like to build my own device. Um, Also, there are forms of Kirlian cameras where they're attached to a Polaroid device, and you can just put your hand in this sock type thing and get your fingerprints. But the problem with that is there's not a lot of Polaroid film available anymore.
Sure.
So we're kind of in a weird place with photography where the analog stuff is harder to find, it's harder to do. So I think that's
Mhm.
why people gravitate more towards the orb photography, because it's the easiest. You can do it with your phone, you can do it with,
Yeah.
you
Do it with
don't
your
even
own
need
phone
a,
camera
yeah,
and you're
you
good
don't
to
even need
go.
a camera.
Hmm.
So, and as a photographer, I'm thankful that I was trained in a dark room, because I'm right at that age where it was traditional photography and then all of a sudden it became digital. So
Hmm.
now I use digital professionally, but I know how to do the analog, and I'm thankful for that. But nowadays people don't even, with your phone, you're not even using a lens, or you're not looking through a viewfinder. You're it's a totally different process.
Completely different. Well, I really
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that you've given us a good overview about spirit photography and the different forms of it. Any other last things you'd like to share with our viewers for today?
Um, just that I hope this was kind of a mishmash sample, and I hope I wasn't, I know I tried to cover a lot of ground very fast, but for each of these presentations, we're going to be going in, doing a deep dive first, and then doing the experiment after that. So hopefully, it'll
For
be,
the in-person
but
classes this October, this in
yes, at Fall
just a couple
Fest.
weeks. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And for our like the spoon bending thing, we'll be doing the presentation where we kind of
Yes.
explain a little bit of where it comes from, and we're going to go into two different approaches to it, which is spirit versus more of like a psychokinetic parapsychology view of the experiment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because there are different ways that it's taught or thought of or used. So that's why.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it's going to be great. So again, you could go to lilydaleassembly.org, get your tickets now. They need to know how many people are coming to those events, and we want to make sure that we have room for you. So go to the lilydaleassembly.org website, get registered by typing into the search bar Fall Fest. I did that myself and I could see the whole array of events. And then you can click on the details of those things and sign up for the classes of your choice. And it's a beautiful opportunity for you to be here in Lilydale in the autumn time, which is so lovely here.
Yes.
And we're looking forward to welcome you that weekend. Please know that there are other ways to connect with Shannon. Shannon, tell them the best ways to connect with you.
So I have my website, shannontaggart.com, and I on there it has all the links. It has my email links. My Instagram is where I'm at most, or Substack. I have a newsletter, and I have, if you want to learn about the symposium, you can just put in your email and sign up, and you will get updates. And that will be in July 2026. And I'm very excited to be there again for that, which is one of my favorite parts of the summer. And this year was really wonderful. We did spoon bending, and it was a big success.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So hoping to have that again.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you were here today to talk about spirit photography. And just as a reminder, if you really enjoyed the show today, please like and share and subscribe. And certainly look back at the archived videos of past episodes of Wednesdays with Willa, where I've had Shannon Taggart on as my guest. We've talked about all kinds of things, especially we did take a deep dive into the photography of mediumship, which is what Shannon has done a lot of specialization in, as well as talking about spiritualist advancements in history. And we've managed to cover a lot of different activities and events over the years having to do, let's see, oh, ITC we did, right? Um, we did that communication level. So there are lots of really cool things that Shannon's been on the show to talk about, and you're going to want to look back at the archive videos. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you, Shannon, for sharing your expertise with us. All right,
Thank you for
everyone.
having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Bye, everyone.